Welcome back to the Real Couchwives podcast, where we overanalyze all things Bravo. Inspired by the mess that is the Austen and Taylor kiss in season 9 of Southern Charm, we're counting down some of our favorite messy moments of the show.
And of course, we need to start with the infamous Thomas Ravenel dinners, where he would invite all of his guests over to impart words of wisdom, as he would say, but really just insult them for, a period of time.
Yeah, exactly. If I had to choose between his dinner parties and Miss Patricia's dinner parties, I'd probably go with hers, even if hers can just still be equally chaotic sometimes.
What do you mean? You don't want to be called, sanctimonious, selfish,
Hattie,
and then run off, chased out of the house?
Yeah, I guess I don't really want to be chased out of the house, but if I had to be chased out of the house, I would love to be in a golf cart while I'm doing my escape.
That's true. So there were actually, I believe there were two Thomas dinners.
Two. Yeah, at least two.
The first one being in season 1, where he invites everyone over, and I think the most brutal part of that was about Whitney, right? Where he's like, Whitney, you outwardly look and dress like you're this open-minded person, but you've proven to be very close-minded and very judgmental.
Yeah, exactly. I that one was good also because Craig called Kathryn out for having slept with 3 people at the table, and she's like, "Oh, really? Name them." I can't get those Chanel earrings that she was wearing out of my head. Those will always the super long spidery eyelashes.
Yeah, the eyelashes were not great. Yeah, Craig definitely was more of an instigator at that one, but Thomas, had some choice words. Also, he got a little jab out at Danny as well.
Yes.
Because Danny had not wanted to date him, and the reason that she gave is because he has a criminal record. And then he's like, you say that you don't want to date someone with a criminal record, but where are these men that you're finding? Who else are you gonna get?
Nobody's perfect. You're always gonna date somebody that has some kind of past, which is true, but it doesn't necessarily
also she just wasn't into you, dude. Also, you're a lot older than her.
That's just that you're at least 20 years older than her, because she, I think, was at least towards her 30s, if she wasn't fully in her 30s at that point. So
yeah,
you just thought that
Kathryn.
She should be happy to settle for you, I think, is what was really happening here.
Yeah, 100%. So that was one of the dinner parties, but then the real, dinner party from hell happens in season 3. And this, I think, is where we saw this is that flip, that switch we keep talking about with Thomas, where he seems to just go into this mode of just pure, I don't even know what the word is, insane. So aggressive, so hostile, so mean, oh my god, something just snaps in him.
It does. He gets there so quickly, and he later blames it on just being too much into his alcohol and getting I guess in his cups, so he says. But yeah, just to think that you would think that you could invite people over to dinner and it would be appropriate for you to kind of list out one by one all of the things that are wrong with each of your guests. And then one of the comments was also that this couldn't have waited until after dinner. This could you had to start off the night on a strong note.
No, it's so true.
Instantly.
So for those who may not remember this scene as vividly, could we set the stage of what exactly happened in this horrendous dinner party?
Well, so I think the interesting thing about this dinner party is that doesn't it start off even before the guests have arrived with a fight between Thomas and Kathryn talking about who's going to be invited to the guest list, and Kathryn is upset that Landon has been included in the guest list because Landon has not been a friend to Kathryn up to this point. They really don't get along, and Kathryn's allegedly spurred some rumors about Landon and Thomas around Charleston. And this is the fight that happens between Thomas and Kathryn, where he jumps out of the window. So starts off on a good note already. And then as soon as the guests actually show up, the dinner party is underway. I think he first actually goes to Kathryn to kind of say I'm optimistic about our future together, which is nice.
Yeah,
that's a good start.
She definitely got away unscathed in this one.
her and Craig came off the easiest, because then Craig that he was just don't pretend to be somebody that you're not.
Yeah, just be yourself.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good advice. And then I think Shep would probably be the third person to get off easiest because he's like, why not take a look at the girl that you admire and adore? And so like Thomas in that moment is like trying to set up Shep and Landon.
Yeah.
Because he knows that Landon has like professed her love to Shep, and he's like, hey, look, you got a good thing going here.
So awkward.
But by the end of the night, Shep is the main person that Thomas is going after.
Oh yeah, that like escalated. He was then he's calling him, you know, saying like, "Oh, is your mom giving you money?" Just like screaming at him. I think he calls him sanctimonious too. So that was definitely his word of the evening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But he starts it off. Yeah, so there's like he goes to Kathryn, he's like, "Oh, I'm really proud of you." And then he goes to Cam and he's like, "Hey, you know, you remind me of my sisters." And you're like, "Okay.
Good start. Cool."
Then he's like, "They're also selfish and sanctimonious and what were they?"
Yeah, self-righteous too. Like, so awful.
And everyone's like, oh, okay, this is what this dinner is.
Oh, okay, I see how it goes.
And like, why would you, like, I feel like to call Cam that, you're like really going after just like the Southern belle of the group.
Yeah.
Like, that's like, you're setting the tone, like, I am here to annihilate you and embarrass you. And like, how could you invite someone over to your home to just like embarrass them and say horrible things about them and then expect them to stay to dinner? And then when they would try to like defend themselves, he would be like, I'm talking.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's a certain level of entitlement that I think you have to have, and like just in general the way that you've probably like gone about your life where like people haven't like questioned you or pushed back on you, that you think that that's an appropriate thing to do. That's pretty special, pretty unique, I would say. Most people don't think that they can behave that way and know that they shouldn't behave that way. Even better.
Well, that's it. And I feel like it's funny because if you were to put this in like a housewife show or something, I feel like it would feel very staged, right? Like I feel like if someone was to do that, it would feel like they plotted this for the show.
Yeah.
I feel like this is very much who Thomas is, and he would do this without the camera.
Well, that's probably true, actually. Well, and it's interesting if you do kind of compare it back to his dinner in season 1, because I think the way that he like invites Jenna and Cam, they have like a scene where he invites Jenna and Cam to the dinner, and he like specifically like kind of frames it as if like, I have some things that I want to say to you guys. I have some words of wisdom to impart upon you. Like, he kind of like gives them a little bit of like a warning that like this is coming. And then when the season 3 one happens, like it really doesn't seem like there's like any kind of like warning. Like he might not have even known until like, you know, he got up to give his speech where he's like, actually, wait a minute, I think I have some things to say.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, and JD also says, he's like, I feel like this was him trying to like take a stance and like stand up for Kathryn, but it's just like, it's so warped the way he chooses to do that. Like, why do you have to completely obliterate everyone else to stand up for Kathryn? And then a disappointing moment too is like Kathryn was like proud of him in this moment. Like in her talking head, she's like, I'm so glad he's finally standing up for me. And it's like their relationship is like so toxic that she doesn't even realize that like this is not the way for him to stand up for you. Like all he's doing is putting more of a target on your back.
They have such an interesting dynamic as a couple. It's unfortunate. And I guess the thing is, if you were like 22, 23 and you were in this relationship, you would think that that was like a nice thing for your boyfriend to do and like a good way for him to like stand up and defend you. But maybe now she knows better.
Yeah, I do think so. But yeah, that was wild. Like I watching that for the first time, like this is why you love Southern Charm too, though, because like the chaos is so chaotic in like such a real way. Like it's unhinged. Like that's not normal behavior.
No, it's not normal behavior, and nothing that Thomas does like ever feels like really normal behavior.
And then the craziest part too is like I feel like because that was the second to last episode of the season, and then you pick back up in season 4 and everyone's just like, I know, fine, and they're all friends again, and it's like, how did you all just move on from this?
Right. And like that's just it. Like then because Kathryn at the beginning of season 4 is the one that's like gone off to rehab,
right?
And they're all like praising Thomas as like this amazing father figure that they like can't believe, even though he's like still at these parties with like these like young girls and like, you know, still probably up to his old ways. He can just pay for the support that his children need, right? Like the nannies, whatever childcare that they need. So like, I don't know, it just doesn't take a lot for him to actually be a good father in their eyes, right?
No,
like,
it's like,
as long as you have the money to back it up.
I mean, this is it. And the double standards run so deep in this show. It's just like, the bar for the men are so low and the bar for the
Yeah.
women is so high, and it's just
Yes.
like it's so ridiculous.
It is so ridiculous.
But yeah, that was definitely a moment that stands out. And then another one is kind of a moment that's kind of fueled on and off the show. It's shrouded in a little bit of mystery, but it's when Cam and the ladies end up kind of being run off the show possibly because of like a rumor that Kathryn had started, and it was just like messy because it was so shocking that
Right.
they didn't return, and like the reasons that they didn't return. And it was also crazy because this had come off of the season where Kathryn had finally gotten back into the good graces with all the women. So it was just such like a whiplash, like, wait, what's happening?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and if you look at like the first episode of season 7, when like this kind of like takes place, right? They start off the season like at the very beginning, like the first few scenes are like them kind of like addressing like the pandemic and like what's happening, and like us kind of like having like that flash forward before they do like the flash backwards to like where they actually are starting the season. And like you don't see like Cameron or any of the people in like, you know, Chelsea, Naomi, like any of them in those like pandemic scenes. So like you kind of are like, wait a minute, are they not going to be in the show? Like I know that when I was watching, I didn't know that they weren't coming back.
Oh, it wasn't like publicized before that?
It might have been, but like I hadn't been aware, and like it wasn't like
Right.
as deep into like the Instagram kind of like Bravo world as I
Yeah, it's
am
fair.
now. So like it was such a surprise, and I was just like waiting for like Cam to like pop up on the screen. I was like, what's going on? And so then when Kathryn and Craig sit down to have that conversation, it definitely was like, oh, this is why they aren't
Right.
here.
And that conversation being when Kathryn essentially brings up a rumor that like Cam's husband has been unfaithful.
Yes. Yeah. Which is super messy of Kathryn because like because you can't really understand the motivation behind it, considering she was like finally in a good place with like all of the women on the cast, or it felt like she was like in a pretty good place with all the women in the cast. Cameron of all people too. And also just like it's so interesting to see Craig, who like usually like lives for reality TV and like playing the kind of like the role that like is needed for him to be able to do this. Him like being physically uncomfortable when Kathryn brings it up too.
Yeah. Yeah, it was it's so true, and it's like we had just watched a season that we like it's season 4 is one of my favorite seasons because all the women are finally together. It is season 4.
Season 5. Season 5 is the Naomi.
Oh, sorry. Okay,
Yeah.
season 5. Yeah. Like all of the women are finally banding together and Kathryn
Mm-hmm.
has support and it's like so great to watch. Season 5 also gives us the insanity that is Ashely Jacobs, which we're going to talk about in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, Kathryn just worked so hard to get on everyone's good side again, and people were finally seeing the levels of manipulation that had been coming from Thomas. Like she was even back in the good graces of like Patricia, who
Yeah.
had such a vendetta against her for like
Yeah.
the whole time, that it's like, why would you do this? Like
Yeah.
why would you put out this rumor? I just don't understand it.
Yeah. Well, and that's just the interesting thing too. Bringing up Ashely Jacobs is that like at the end of season 6, which is like the last like, you know, I think that I'm pretty sure that the last scene is Miss Patricia's like party. She's like doing like one of her like Winter Wonderland parties or something. And that's the episode where Ashely actually gets like escorted out by security, and Kathryn is like actually like there with Miss Patricia and like, you know, fully kind of like immersed in the group at that point
Yeah,
still. So it's just crazy like what happens kind of like in the in-between seasons to potentially, you know, create these shifts.
that's true. One of the things that get brought up a lot in this group too is that like they're all friends and they're all hanging
Mm-hmm.
out when they're not filming as well. So I think that's why it feels like when you pick up every season,
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, the stuff from the previous season is like completely buried and done with at this point, because I guess they've
Yeah.
all just forgiven each other because
Right.
they've hung out so many times after.
Mm-hmm.
Or like in this scenario, like something had clearly happened that we weren't privy to, and like
Mm-hmm.
it has led to, you know, half of almost all of the women not
Yeah.
returning,
Yeah.
and we're
Yeah.
just like, why?
Yeah, and like basically requiring because the thing is like it felt like it had always been such a core kind of like cast, right? Like it did keep on kind of like expanding outwards, but it still felt like it was a core group. And then when season 7 happened, like there was this like massive shift. There was all these new characters. Well, there wasn't all those new characters, but there was like a few new characters. Like they hadn't really been fully brought in the way that they normally would have been. And it just feels like there's kind of like a before and after of like seasons like 1 to 6 and then 7 onwards. It's just such a different shift.
It's so true. And also I feel like when you look back, like when we were trying to make a list of like messy moments, and obviously like we're starting with like a condensed 5. We'd love to do more. There's so many that we could think of. So we'll probably have
I'm sure that people can even think of some of their own too that are like their favorite moments.
Yeah, totally. Like let us know in the chat, like what are your favorite messy moments? We're gonna have a part 2, 3, 4. Like we could go at this forever. But almost all of them are gonna be from those first 6 seasons. And you brought up a good point that I wonder if it is because the group had started to get a little bigger and they would bring in people who weren't necessarily in the group outside of the show. So like the drama is not as ingrained in reality, or not in reality, but like the drama here is like, this is real life drama of like real lifelong friendships for a long time, and it's messy, you know. It's the same way as like when we watch The Challenge, you know, after more than 10 years, like we know all of the you know, breakups and makeups and fights. So like when you're watching it with all of that history, it feels like it's worth more, kind of.
No, definitely. And even like because the like I always kind of think of like season 7, 8, and 9, or like, you know, 9's kind of still unfolding, but like season 7 and 8 in particular felt like kind of like very like Madison heavy and like very Madison like centric. So there are like some messy moments, but I would say that those moments kind of often feel a little bit more like vindictive or revengeful, just because of like the hate that Shep and Craig had for Madison for like the longest time. Whereas like these moments are a little bit like more messy and like they're inappropriate, maybe they're wrong, but they're still like relatively fun. Relatively.
There's definitely there's a delicate balance. And actually the next one that we're going to talk about, which is Ashely, I feel like there was times like I won't deny that Ashely Jacobs was incredible television on Southern Charm. Like her level of just like delusion and like I don't want to say crazy, but like no, girl was unhinged.
Like a
was
little
just
bit
unmatched. But even she got to points where it's like some of the stuff she was saying to Kathryn is like it's getting, I always call it like Rinna crazy. Like you're going on Lisa Rinna where you're like, this is not even.
You're just saying things.
Is it even fun to watch anymore? Because it's so crazy. Like it's like I feel weird watching this person.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Ashely Jacobs I never took maybe as seriously as like a Lisa Rinna,
that's true,
or like a Ramona or something, like who like definitely like had their moments. Because at least she was on the show for like a pretty brief period of time, so like I'm glad that we kind of got her for like a season and then like a couple little smatterings here and there. But like had she been like a long-standing character that we had to deal with like time and time again, I definitely think I would feel differently.
100%.
And she definitely brought some interesting levels to the show. She clearly just like thought that you know, Thomas was, I don't want to say golden ticket because obviously that has like certain implications, but like, you know, she thought that she was going to be able to like get a really nice life from this man and that he was serious, and he was not serious. He was never serious. That man has not been serious a day in his life. And she unfortunately fell for it a little bit. And then in the moments when she was starting to see that he might not be so serious, she interestingly turned to some other members of the group to be able to see if they might be a little bit more serious.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was crazy. So I guess to set the stage a little bit, for those of you who haven't seen it or may not remember, Ashely had come in season, oh my gosh, you just told me
season
5. As you know, Thomas's new girlfriend. She had moved there after they'd only been dating for like a few months, I want to say.
Like no time.
So she moved from California to be with him, and she meets Kathryn, and at first she's like, oh, you know, like I want to get along with you, like you're the mother of his children. And then she like immediately flips a switch and just like goes so anti-Kathryn. She's just on like a tirade against her. She like says she's nothing but an egg donor, like she's not their mother, she's not their family. And the moment that sticks out in my mind, there's actually a couple with Ashely, but the first one being, I think, like where it really hit the fan for the first time was the trip to Hilton Head, where you know, Chelsea and Craig had Chelsea
Shep.
and Shep had, brought everyone to Hilton Head where they're from. And there was a really bad conversation that happens between Ashely and Kathryn, mainly because Ashely was not invited to Kathryn Thomas's son's birthday, which like she's still really new in their life, like that's up to Kathryn.
Yeah.
And she just goes so berserk over that they end up just like going back and forth. And then Ashely just takes it way too far. She's like, I see those kids more than you do. Like, I see the state that they come home in. Like, Saint was sick. His name is Saint?
Saint, yeah.
Yeah, Saint was, oh my God. Like, for some reason I'm
think
saying words today and I'm like, what is that?
Is that the word? No, I think it's like, isn't it like Saint Julian or something like that?
Yeah, because sometimes they call him something else. But
yeah, Julian, I think.
Yeah, he was sick. And then she's like, you didn't even come to see him. And Kathryn's like, it's because I was court ordered, not allowed to come. And Kathryn just like kept her demeanor, and like Ashely was just going like the lowest of blows, and it was just disgusting.
Yeah. And then it's kind of in those moments that we can kind of see like Ashley's kind of like fighting style and the way that she kind of like goes at Kathryn, right? And she like starts to get a little bit of, for lack of a better term, like the crazy eyes.
Oh yeah.
Like it's really like popping out. Yeah, and so it's not great. And then clearly like, Thomas then, does nothing, doesn't help stand up for like either woman of either party, doesn't help kind of like mediate and like try to like break it down or anything like that. But continues to kind of string Ashely along. And I'm honestly sure that like behind the scenes, there was a lot of like things happening on Thomas's side to kind of like continue to pit these women against each other.
Oh yeah, that's like his MO. I feel like the more, the more of the spotlight is on the women in a negative way, kind of like keeps him okay in the background.
Yeah, balanced out.
It was so bad. And like, the women were speaking up with Kathryn. They're like, Thomas, like, don't, like, you can't let her talk to her like that. Like, what are you doing? And then it only gets worse because then they have to take like a ferry back or something. And then Ashely starts going after Danny, calling her an enabler.
Yeah.
And then like, the cringiest moment is like, you just see like Thomas, and then Thomas gets really crazy too. And they're just kind of like egging on each other and like the craziness and the angriness. And Thomas gets super aggressive. And then Ashley's like, it's me and you, baby. Like, it's just me and you against the world. And like, and like, she's like loving that. And it's like, I feel like every partner of Thomas's, like he instills this like you and me against the world because he makes everyone hate them.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, like, I think that it feels like throughout the season, like she's like desperately kind of like clinging on to him and like trying to like, get that validation from him of like, this is like a lifelong partnership thing. This is a thing that will go the distance. Like, you will make me a wife. And I'm sure that he was behind the scenes telling her these things as well. But then because it's not like expressed kind of outwardly, like really on camera, except for that time that he's like, oh, maybe I should buy us like some promise rings, even though I should get her like my family crest on a ring, even though I just told you guys that I think I'm going to break up with her. So like clearly some like mind games happening there too.
Yeah. Well, that's it. And some of the other parts too that are so just like add to the whole Ashely persona is like, very early on in their relationship, she's like, let's have babies. Like, we're gonna have the cutest babies. Like, when are you gonna marry me? And then he spends like $10,000 buying her like giving her like a pretty woman makeover.
Yeah, the clothing that Patricia helps her like pick out. Yeah, and like Patricia really clearly, like similar to how Patricia was like pointing, like, trying to get Landon and Thomas together, she very much tries to do the same to like instill her words of wisdom to Ashely and like let her know like, hey, I've been very successful. I've married well each time and I've divorced even better. And here I am and this is what you can do and this is how to do it. And Ashely just doesn't really kind of quite like operate on that level. But so interestingly then, like, I think a pretty messy moment that's like quickly followed up by some of the fights that Thomas and Ashely are having is Ashely starts to kind of express her interest to both Craig and Shep just to kind of see like, hey, if this whole thing with Thomas doesn't work out, let me put some feelers out there. I think there's actually even been a report that she potentially approached Whitney too.
Of course.
I saw it on like a very unofficial website, but like they had a quote from Whitney, but like, who knows? I wouldn't be too surprised. So I think the one from Craig was actually in season 5, episode 11, when they're at the Trop Hop tasting at for Austen's like new beer.
Oh yeah, because they like had a fight first or something.
Yes, yeah, they just had a fight, and like the thing is, like throughout like the second half of the season, like she always has this like really like hoarse voice where you can tell that they've just been like screaming at each other for like days. Like it's unfortunate. It doesn't really sound like it was a good situation. But so apparently in like a deleted scene, she's like, if you were a couple years younger and, or sorry, if you were a couple years older, like, maybe you and I would be good or whatever. Which is like interesting. And the thing is like also like they're quite close in age as well, so I think they're only like 2 years apart. So it's like, okay, what do you really mean by like if I was a couple years older point. Like is it like if I was a little bit more established? Exactly. And then it's actually in a couple episodes later in episode 13 when they're at Thomas's like plantation doing like the polo matchy thing, and she approaches Shep and she makes a joke about it, but she's like, would you date me if I could stay in Charleston? Like it's just kind of like Shep just kind of like laughs it off and is like, oh whatever, la la la. But it's definitely one of those things where like I've never gone around to my boyfriend's partners, to like his friends, and like been like, hey, if it doesn't work out with me and this guy, like, is there any opportunity for me to come live with you in your house crazy instead?
And it's like, you're on camera, right? Like
right? Yeah, exactly. And she's addressed it as well a little bit afterwards, being like, oh, it was a joke, like they knew it wasn't real, but it's like, was it a joke?
One of those like, ha ha ha.
Yeah, like if they had taken you up on it, like maybe you would have like entertained this idea actually. But
well, yeah, totally. Well, remember, like, was it as the season was airing? So I only saw this come out later, but like she had done a cameo to a fan, and they had like put it on Reddit.
Yeah,
and that
was the funniest cameo ever.
It was so funny. She was basically just like spilling all kinds of tea and just being like, oh my god, like Kathryn's crazy, like these people are crazy, like, oh, anyways, like if you're ever in California, like let me know, like we can hang out. And it's like, this is like a literal stranger who's paying you
to guys want to hang out,
to record a message, and she's just like spilling all of this tea. It was so funny.
Which I guess is what you do kind of want on a cameo, but
oh yeah, like that person got way more than what they paid, I'm sure.
No idea what was coming.
And then
Ashely.
Of course, like you can't talk about messy Ashely moments without, it's the Founders Day ball, I believe, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Where everyone is like dressed up in their like gowns and their gloves. Oh yeah, this is the one where like Kathryn was like invited back into society by Patricia.
Yes.
And her and Ashely start fighting outside. It's like I feel like it's so vividly in my mind. Like Ashely is wearing her red dress, and like Kathryn has her hair pinned back, I believe, and then they're outside the gate, right? Because they're just like fighting like as they're leaving. And yeah, this is where Ashley's like, you're not like you're nothing but an egg donor, and she says that they're not a family, and it's like there's some things in life that you cannot take back. No. And I think that is one of them.
That is one of them, and that is a particularly cruel insult to like send out at somebody who like is having like this ongoing struggle like with custody battles and like trying to get her children back and trying to be able to see them and spend any amount of time with them, especially now that we kind of know how it's all ended up, right?
So sad. It's also just like, why is that what you would go to? Like she just kept clinging on to the fact that like somehow Kathryn's not their mother, because like why? Because you should be their mother, right? Like is that what you're getting at? Like it's just like, why is that where she went?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many questions that we could ask about Ashely. Even like whenever she comes back in season 6 and tries to like apologize, like every time she almost attempts to apologize, she then kind of like doesn't fully go back to like insulting everybody, but she kind of just goes back to insulting everybody. She doesn't do a particularly good job of like trying to mend fences.
It's very and it's very similar to Thomas, right? Like I feel like you say something like the moment she realizes like she doesn't think it's going well, she just goes for the jugular. But like there's some people, for example, in like Real Housewives of Potomac, where always like Candace does like great reads, right? They're pretty below the belt, but they're always entertaining. Like this is not
enjoyable.
This isn't even that, right? No. Like this is just purely like, how could a person even utter these words from their mouth?
No, exactly. Yeah, very low blows.
Yeah. Well, and she definitely left a mark on the show.
She did. She did. You know, we thank her for her time. It's enjoyable to watch back now, especially now that we know that like we're past that time. But
Happy she's no longer on
yeah.
the show.
So another pretty messy character on Southern Charm, who actually does a pretty good job of masking it. I'd say probably about 90% of the time. Do you think that's accurate?
Yeah, it might be a little high.
Okay, all right. Would be Mr. Shepard Rose. You know, I think we've seen this come out kind of like most recently in season 9, with his comment that he made to Taylor after Taylor asked, well, I guess even going back, right? Like, you know, he loses this ping pong match to JT. He is very upset that he's lost his ping pong match, and you know the competitive edge just gets the better of him. He, you know, comes out, he's sulking, he's mad, he's clearly in a bad mood. Taylor says, you know, we are the champions to JT. Shep gets upset. And unfortunately, Taylor then asks him the question, did you enjoy cheating on me? And he said, you know, yeah, sometimes I did. Um, which was quite messy and quite unnecessary.
Yes, very, very
Yeah.
messy. Very
Yeah.
Thomas Ravenel, you know, reminiscent of.
A little Thomas Ravenel 2.0 and Mr. Shepard Rose.
It kind of seems like it's coming.
It does feel like it's coming, unfortunately, a little bit. But yeah, so I think more than anything, like the messiness of Shep is just the way that he kind of like lets the emotions get the better of him in these competitive moments specifically.
Yeah.
Two other moments, obviously, that like the one that they bring up in the episode in season 9 is that they're referencing in season 8 when Shep and Taylor are participating in like an egg toss, and like their egg falls on the ground, and so like Taylor goes and like breaks it, and Shep was like, why did you do that? And like, you stupid idiot, like for the fact that like she broke the egg even though it like had fallen on the ground, so like the game was done, there was no way that she could,
and it's
you were supposed
egg
to
toss.
And it's an egg toss. It's a quick way to escalate a situation like that, very unnecessarily. But it also reminded us of a moment in season 2 when Shep and Craig actually have a little face off in the season finale at Miss Patricia's it's like a charity event that she's doing for wounded warriors, and so like for like Marines. It's on this like big like massive ship, and they're both auctioned off for dates, and Kelsey Ballerini, I believe she bids $5,001 to be able to go on a date with Craig, and then Shep gets up there and Cameron is the only person that bets on him, and boy is he sour about it.
He was so salty. And then he's like, oh, it's just because Craig went first. Like...
yeah, it's because Craig went first. He couldn't believe that Craig had gotten like all dressed up for this event. Like Shep, I think, was literally in like, well, I can't fully remember what he was in, but he wasn't as dressed up as Craig. Like Craig was definitely like, you know, fully coiffed as he was usually doing back then. And, you know, like also maybe Craig just hadn't like already like approached every single girl in that room, and every girl didn't know what it would be like to go on a date with Craig, whereas they might have already known what it would be like to go on a date with Shep, so they might not have been as interested in
such a good
in doing that.
He is so competitive. Like, you do not want to play sports or anything that's in the realm of competition with this man, because that is where his switch flips.
It does. And then he really goes for the jugular, like in those moments too, right? Like just like it's not fun.
No. Well, the crazy thing too is like going back to, you know, the one that we're seeing play out this season, like not only does he just like, you know, fully attack Taylor, but then when she storms off and, you know, she throws a drink in him on his face, or at his
on him in general,
not specific to the facial area,
but you know, pretty.
But then he like turns around and is like goes off on Austen. That, like, Austen's always been against him, and like, you know, actually speaking of his competitiveness, like he's obviously had a bone to pick with Austen going back to the first season he was on the show, because, you know, in Shep's telling of events, apparently, you know, he had gone on a date with Chelsea, And then he went away for a weekend, and then Austen swooped in, and then like Chelsea and Austen were a thing.
All of a sudden, as if Chelsea has no autonomy in all of this.
Chelsea has no free will.
Doesn't get to choose.
Any man that is around her at the time, that's where she's gonna go.
The one that claims her first is the one that gets her.
Austen was there, so he won. He was like, it's just such a misogynistic way of looking at this. And even when he talks about it this season, he's like, oh, Austen just wants to play with everyone else's toys in the sandbox. And I'm like, okay.
What a weird thing to say.
Yeah, because these girls are just your toys.
Yeah, literally.
That you're playing with. Like, what?
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. And that's the whole thing too about like the theory behind why Shep has always been so against Madison, right? Is that like because Madison dated Austen, and apparently Shep had kind of like seen her first, and he'd kind of gone after and pursued her, and she had turned him down, and she then they kind of like then have like this like years long battle between Shep and Madison going on.
Oh my god! And did I know that? Did they put that in the show?
They talk about it in the show,
okay,
but like
remember.
Yeah, because Madison like talks about how like Shep had hit on her. And how he was upset that she had just turned him down,
right?
And then all of the like kind of like vindictive-y things that he does to try to like get back at her and Austen, right? Like him bringing the girls from the infamous Austen cheating video to like a ball or whatever, and like just in general like constantly going after Madison, calling her white trash, calling her every name in the book, even calling her a banshee this year. Like
it's so, oh my god, it's so true. It's like he's literally like the epitome of like the kid in school who will like shove the girl that he likes or something, or they're like really mean to the girl.
Yeah, exactly. Put her face in the sandbox or something. Oh my god.
I mean, a lot of the men are like that too. Like you could look at Whitney, right? Like, and like remember Craig's theory that Whitney was so mean to Kathryn because he actually loved her, which like I still don't know was untrue.
I know. Like I definitely felt like Craig might be speaking some words of wisdom right now when he brought out that theory. I didn't hate it.
Yeah. So if you want to get a messy moment from Shep, just
go after the girl
have him lose in some sort of child.
Exactly.
But I love how someone commented too that like it's not just like any game, like he has to lose at like a silly childhood game.
Well, that's just it, like ping pong, an egg toss, like come on. Even like the whole like betting, like the charity like auction, right? Like it's so silly.
Yeah. Ugh. Maybe it's because he doesn't play real sports. I don't know. Does he?
Maybe.
He probably does like tennis or something.
Probably. He does like fishing and stuff too, and like hunting. Like he does like those kind of like I don't know what to categorize those at. Outdoorsy sports, let's say.
Yeah. Those are good ones that you brought back up.
No, thank you.
Don't know what he's gonna get up to next because as you were saying, like he's definitely, especially going back and watching some of these Thomas scenes, like his dinner party scene, like Shep is getting dangerously close to this territory, and he's also, it feels like he's getting more bitter as he ages, and like just like his jealousy he's always had of like Shep and Craig. Like he's always had a problem with either Shep or Craig at one point or another.
Right.
And it does read as jealousy.
It does. And well, and especially now that he's kind of like becoming a little bit of like the older guy in the group, like it's kind of interesting to see what's going to happen as like maybe Craig and Austen like a little bit age out of like how Shep behaves, right? And like they've kind of been like the young guys that he was always like going out and drinking with. But if Craig really does settle down with Paige and Austen, gets his act together, maybe he'll kind of like be left behind and have to go find like new 24-year-old friends to like hang out with and like live these party days with.
It's so true. And something I thought about too is like when the season first started, like there was like Shep was friends with like, he was always the bridge kind of, right? Like he was friends with like Thomas and Whitney who were older, but they were still very much partying. And then he's also friends with Austen and Craig who are younger, but still very much partying. And now it's like,
it's true. He was the middle guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
But now, like you said, Craig is maybe starting to settle down and like what maybe he feels like where's his place in the group anymore, like
maybe, especially because he did just kind of spend the last 2 seasons like being a little bit more serious and a little bit more monogamous with Taylor.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what mess awaits us from
Only
Shep.
time will tell.
Are there other moments that, we missed? I'm sure there are. Let
Yeah.
us know.
Oh, definitely.
And then, of course, we'd be remiss, to not speak about the messiest of messes, which actually fueled and set the tone for Southern Charm, which is Kathryn and Thomas's relationship, right? Like, you
Yeah.
will never forget the ending of season 1 when you see
Classic.
Thomas and Kathryn break up,
Yeah.
and you're like, great. That's for the best. I'm glad that this happened. Like, this is not this relationship is toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And then it fades to black and you hear a baby crying and they have had a child.
Yeah.
And this is setting the tone for season 2. And
Yeah.
then they have
And, like,
and then there's another
everything to come
child.
after
And then
that.
there's like
Yeah.
a custody battle. And it's just
I
like
know.
they, we've talked about this before, like Kathryn and Thomas's, like the heartbeats of their relationship has been the beats of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the times they've been quite messy.
That's just it. Well, and even like talk about like kind of like, season 1 to 6 versus 7 and a 7 to present. Like, there's so much of season 1 to 6 is about like Thomas and Kathryn's relationship, and like without their relationship, like maybe that's also why we're missing a little bit of like the anchor of the show, right? Because they were like so messy. They really like showed us everything. Like, oh my god, we knew almost every little bit of drama that was happening in those people's lives. So
yeah, we really did. They very much let us in, and I feel like there's so many moments that stand out. Like, yeah, the first one just being like when we realized that they had a baby together, and you're just like, what?
Whoa, okay, that happened.
Like that.
I know.
Like that is an iconic scene, and like
it is.
Oh my gosh, it was crazy. And we talked about this before. Where we're like, I don't feel like this got as much credit as it did. That like they had to pick back up filming from there, right? Because they ended filming, they broke up, but then they have a baby, so they like, I guess, picked up footage from
they must have just like sent like a camera crew or something over, like to get like, hey, like let's get a shot of you and the baby and like add it in as like the last part of the scene.
And that is a wild finale. And like, was this the first Scandival, but it just didn't get the attention it deserved?
Yeah, I know. I mean, we weren't engaged on the internet in the same way when this all happened, so I think it didn't get the attention it deserved, but boy was it wild. Yeah, and I can't imagine that. Like, I see so many times comments of people on Instagram and TikTok and stuff talking about how like you can skip over season 1 of Southern Charm, and I'm like, no, you cannot skip over season 1 of Southern Charm. It is pivotal, like, to everything that's going to come afterwards. Like, come on.
It's so true. I can, however, understand that comment, because I remember having a really hard time getting through maybe like the first 2 to 3 episodes.
Totally.
Because I just didn't understand it. I was like, why are there's these really old dudes, and like why are they pursuing these really young girls? And like it's about, and at the beginning it kind of seemed more to be about like class, like like upper class people in Southern Charm, not Southern Charm, in Charleston. Like it didn't really know what its footing was. But you're right, it really does, like it sets the foundation of all of the relationships, and it's like so pivotal. We also went back and started watching the first few episodes recently, and I was like, oh my god, like this doesn't start off slow, this is so quick. Like, why did I think that?
I know. Going back into it, you're like, oh wow, no, this is like right off the bat, so many things are happening. We're having a pregnancy scare within like the first like 4 or 5 episodes. Like we're having like this like love triangle. Like, we know that like Shep and Kathryn have hooked up. We know that Austen Thomas and Kathryn have hooked up, and then we're like finding out that like maybe it's also happening with Whitney, but then Craig's also in love with her, and like it's just that's the original love square of this series.
It's so true. And it's like, for like, and she was like the sought after person of the season, and then she was just so like demonized, like villainized the rest of the seasons on and off.
Well, that's just it. She was so young whenever this is happening, whenever I'm seeing like anybody fighting with her, I'm just like, you're fighting with a baby, like what are you even doing? Like,
it's
I know
really
she's
despicable.
tall, so
like,
maybe
it's really
like confusing, but
like for her to have had to go through so much of that alone and just be like completely villainized, while like Thomas was just like praised, or either praised or like, oh well, that's just Thomas.
And like her frontal lobe hadn't even fully formed at that point, right? Like she was still making life decisions, and Yeah, making major life decisions.
It's so wild. Another
so
one
crazy.
of like the Thomas Kathryn relationship, like messy
Yeah.
moment that stands out is actually that same fundraiser that you were talking about.
Oh yeah,
Where
on the big boat.
on the boat where she
Yeah.
comes up in her like big fur coat,
Oh my God,
and Thomas basically runs away and she's
Yeah.
running after him and she's like, Thomas, and her voice is like cracking. She's like, I'm not gonna let you leave me.
Yeah. I know. Oh my God. Yeah, and the thing is, like, they got such good like cost per use out of that scene too, because I feel like they bring
They
it up
use it all
like
the
every
time.
season afterwards as well. It's such a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then also like as I mentioned before too, the jumping out of the window scene during the argument, like, oh my God, so over the top. Like, yes, he clearly had like something that he could like, balance on. It's not like he like jumped out of the window and like
just
fell
fell.
to the bottom. Like he jumped out. He was like
He was
probably
on
like
a
standing
ledge.
on like a ledge or something. Yeah, or like another part of the house if there was like a lower level that was like connected. And so he did end up eventually like come back inside, but then apparently like they were saying how she like locked him in the room, and it's like, well, can you really be like locked in the room if you're locked from the inside of the room? But anyways, I don't know.
Yeah, but still,
Yeah,
like you're like a 55-year-old man who's like
fighting
jumping
with
out
your
of a
20-year-old.
window.
Yeah, exactly.
And then like there's also just moments too where they like come back together unexpectedly, and you're like, why?
I know. Well, and that's just it. It's like sometimes you really can see like the chemistry between the two of them. And maybe in a different life things could have worked out, but it just, yeah, it's kind of unfortunate.
It's just so tumultuous. Like I wonder if their kids will ever see this show. And like,
oh my God, I bet that they will. I honestly bet that they will.
Probably, but that's rough. Also, those kids are the spitting image of Kathryn and Thomas.
Oh my God, they like, really are. Like, and such a marriage of the two of them too.
It's wild. I find Kenzie just looks straight up like Kathryn, and then like Saint looks straight up like Thomas. Like,
yeah, but sometimes like you can see a little bit of like like vice versa, like Thomas and her, and like Kathryn and him too. Like there's just something so interesting about like the way that their genes have intermingled and like formed two children. Such a weird way to mention that. Blended.
It's true. And then like we also like we keep even though neither of them are on the show, like the mess continues.
Oh, I know.
Outside of it, like actually the most recent one is Thomas like went on Twitter or something and was like, the worst person that I've ever met is Kathryn Dennis.
Yeah,
like she's a monster. And it's like, that is the mother of your children. Like, speaking of your kids reading this, like oh my God, like
I know
the audacity of you to go out and write that. And it's like, she's already lost custody. Like, why do you keep doing this?
Exactly. Like, why do you need to like beat a dead horse? Like, she doesn't have access to her children really right now. So like, haven't you won? Haven't you had enough? Like, I don't know.
He's such a despicable person that it's just like, ugh, gross.
So on that note,
those are some messy moments.
Yeah, those are some very messy moments. There's so many messy moments of Southern Charm, though. That's the great thing about this cast.
There's so many. Probably, I would actually go out. Okay, Southern Charm and Vanderpump Rules probably have the messiest of storylines.
Yes, yeah, messy for kind of different reasons. Like, oh God, Vanderpump Rules. Those kids were just so messy. Yeah. I would be interested to kind of like do like a showdown or something of like their messy moments or something. Oh my God, yes. Because there's just so many.
We should totally do that. They're just like, I was gonna say they're so different, but like not necessarily. Like they're both really grounded again in like the real life relationships of the groups, which is
like a real group dynamic.
What's so incredible. And it's like, and I feel like that's why you'll never get the same level of mess on a housewife show.
No,
because
I don't think so.
Minus maybe New Jersey, or even like early Beverly Hills a little bit. Like, they're just not real friends from the beginning. Like they're chosen to be in this cast. And when they are, like, that's when the mess comes out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's just it. Like, and it's just the luckiness of these producers. Sorry, my voice is like breaking, apparently. Going through puberty now. It's like the just the magic that has to happen for these producers to like come across this like group of people at this time and like be able to like see the potential of a reality TV show. Like clearly I think because Whitney was the one that was the like executive producer, like he was just kind of like watching his life and being like, you know what, this would make a great TV show, and he was 100% right.
It's so true. And that was before Kathryn and Thomas had even gotten together.
No, exactly. That's when Kathryn and Whitney were getting together. Probably
he thought it was going to be a very different show.
Probably, yeah. I think we all thought it was going to be a pretty different show when we first heard about it.
That's true. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, let us know your
good.
favorite moments. We're gonna do multiple installments of this because we could talk about it for days. But right now, Iris actually has to go hop on a plane to London.
Which is why
Casually.
we're filming in the daytime and it's so sunny. I'm so sorry.
So it's sunny for me too. So next time you see Iris, she'll be in London and she'll have a British accent.
Yeah, exactly. I'll start taking tips from Madonna right now.